Hi again. Thanks for joining us for a special report online. I'm Brett Baer. If this is your first time aboard, welcome. It's a great forum to continue the conversation with our panel. We want to hear from you. You can ask questions, write comments, a little bit more relaxed. Our panel, Jonah, Amy, and Charles, obviously talking politics. We talked about the Cruz-Rubio back and forth. I want to play a soundbite that we had pulled up, didn't use in the show, of the battle.
The only thing that frustrates me is that Senator Rubio won't answer questions. And then when he gets in front of folks at town hall meetings, he, does a drop-by. That's like a drive-by town hall, man.
I think both Jeb and Chris have had a tough couple days, and obviously sometimes people don't react well to adversity. And so they're saying some things they'll probably later on regret, but that's not going to change my campaign. I want to get to your questions, so I'm going to be brief. I'm going to stay here as long as anyone's here, so I'll be more than happy to greet all of you personally and talk to you any follow-up. I don't leave until everyone's gone.
I said Cruz-Rubio. I've had a tough couple of days. Christie Rubio, obviously, and Jonah, it is kind of like the playground. He's ready for the fight, and it seems like he's probably going to get it at this next debate.
Yeah, no, I think all targets are going to be on Rubio for the obvious reason that Charles was getting at, that they see him as blocking the lane out of New Hampshire. That said, I think Rubio is probably playing this as smart as he can, both from his his speech on a caucus night to this. He is trying to stay above the fray, working. I was listening to him on talk radio, talking up about how he can unite the party and how the party's so divided, and he's one of the few guys that everyone likes. And I think that's, for strategic voters in New Hampshire, and there are quite a few, I think that's smart. And he seems, and while you have all those other bickering, and one of my questions is whether or not Carson's flat with Cruz is a real problem for Cruz, because Cruz's strategy has always been to pick up Carson voters once Carson gets out, and if Carson poisons that well, that could be a real problem for Cruz down the line.
It's been really interesting to see Christie is so frustrated by the fact that he, as the governor, was going to get that outsider mantle, and now he's seeing two young first-term senators get that mantle, and you can see it visibly makes him insane. That is how this race has boiled down to. The other thing to remember too is it's the super PAC for Rubio has been going after Christie pretty hard, and it's taken a toll. And you can see in his poll numbers in New Hampshire, a couple weeks ago, Christie was on the rise, or maybe it's 3 weeks ago. Those ads came up. He's dropped back down. Kasich has gone up. Now they're doing ads on Kasich. So they don't have as much room to grow. To your point of everybody likes Rubio, that's what his ceiling has always been, his greatest asset. He has always room to grow.
Well, speaking of money spent, obviously the Bush campaign, the Bush super PAC has spent a lot of money, Charles, going after Rubio. They also spent a lot of money in Iowa. By all accounts, the average is roughly $2,800 per vote in Iowa.
Be better to go out and just to buy them, though I think it's illegal. Look, it's quite, I hate to use the word because it's a staple of the Trump tweets, but it's quite sad. Bush is a serious guy, had a very successful governorship. He comes from a distinguished family. There's sort of expectations, and he can't get any traction. I don't know if it's not his year. I'm not sure if it will be any year. He just is not a good presidential candidate. And he's got to make a decision. There's getting a lot of pressure now that if he doesn't succeed in New Hampshire, the definition being beat Rubio, he's going to leave. And I think that applies to the other governors, could be Carly as well. And I think that's probably his fate, because all the bombs he dropped on Rubio, and there was a ton of money, I think it was calculated at $20 million, left no trace. Rubio had an 8-point spring. He jumped 8 points over the expectation in Iowa from 15 to 23, and I think he's going to do strongly in New Hampshire. But I would want to add one thing. Amy and Jonah have talked a lot about the psychological strains that are now exploding. Trump exceeding the 36-hour statute of limitations on graciousness. After that, he just explodes. And I love the way that Rubio condescendingly said, Christie's having a tough time. I think, there might be an opening here where I could go back and do a little therapy with these
Prescribing?
guys. Because, it looks like a field
Yeah, can
hospital.
you still write scripts?
Oh, yes.
Oh.
Of course.
Oh,
Actually, when
Why do you think the panel's so peppy on Fridays?
I know.
Okay, speaking of Trump, this is what he had to say on Morning Joe this morning about that decision to miss the debate in Iowa.
I had something that night. I had basically a fundraiser for the vets. And in a period of 1 hour, we raised $6 million. So I was very happy with that. And frankly, I don't think I would have given up a first versus second and not give the vets $6 million.
Right.
So finishing second and getting them $6 million was okay for me. But I might have been hurt a little bit by the debates, by not being at the debates.
Yeah, he did say he was hurt a couple of times, Jonah, and the New York Times had this piece where they said it was the 5 stages of coming in second for Donald Trump, and it was silence, frustration, attack, regret, and then denial, saying I actually won and came in first.
It's a very sweet line where he says, I'm glad I would not trade the $6 million I gave to vets for coming in first. The problem with that is that it assumes that the only night he had any choice to run a fundraiser for vets was the night of the debate, which he had agreed to for months in advance.
Or he could have written a check for $6 million
Or
to
right,
vets.
could have done that too.
You don't.
Which is a rounding error.
Right. And I also liked in the same interview on Morning Joe, he said, I never heard about what this ground game was until recently. Someone says ground game to me, I say, what the hell is that? It's like, really? I mean, there are only 2 possibilities there. Either he's telling the truth, in which case he's not watched a single one of the political shows in the last 6 months, or he's not read a single article.
Well, we know that's not true because he knows every detail of
That's right.
Special Report and other shows.
Or he's lying. But either way, what I think it does is it highlights the fact that he really thought he could. Because there's also this rumor that he doesn't want to buy his own data. He thinks the media. He says the media does the public polling. Why would I get any other polls? And it just shows that he's so far has not really been willing to run a serious presidential campaign.
All right, Indy Farmer writes, the GOP candidates want to show that they can beat other Republicans. Seems that they need to show that they can beat Democrats. That's really the closing argument for Rubio. That's what he's trying to say, is that he's best positioned there. J.S. John 7 says, will Cruz collapse before Trump? Do you think that the Carson staying in, being there, getting 8, 9, 10 is a real problem for Cruz?
I was surprised, actually, that he did stay at 10%. I thought we were going to see Carson drop down to about 5% and that he was going to lose those folks in Iowa. The difference, though, as we move on, yes, we have states that are very evangelical, but Iowa is one of the highest percentage of evangelical votes. So Carson would need to, for him to hit 10%, he would need to do extraordinarily well with very conservative and evangelical, and I still think that's going to be tough for him to do.
Scott Mr. Duck says, I think Rush Limbaugh's statement on Rubio as an authentic Republican is the biggest help for Marco going forward.
Authentic conservative is what Rush called him.
Yeah.
Look, on paper, he's really in a good place. We don't know how this translates. But again, the 2 top dogs hitting each other, he slides through. His favorables, as we saw in Iowa, were just off the chart. He had a plus of 49, meaning the people who view him favorably exceed the ones who view him unfavorably by 49. Trump is at a plus 3. Cruz at a plus 37, which is quite respectable. But Rubio is the highest in that ranking, and he was also the highest in second choice. And this is a race that is going to reward the second choice. If nobody is above 30, in the end, the guy who gets the second choices is going to emerge above 50 if that continues. All this can obviously change. But on paper, if you had to make a straight line projection, he's right now, I think, in the best place.
There are some people here who say this is a panel of Trump haters, and that is a constant criticism. But I think we've been fair to Mr. Trump all along, his successes and his shortcomings. E.T. Ferg writes, Trump is a reality TV master. He controls the news cycle and hasn't spent his own money yet. He is smarter than the politicians, but is he a leader and statesman that America needs?
That, to me, was what stood out in Iowa almost more than anything else. When voters went into the polls, they were asked, what would you rather have, somebody who is experienced or somebody who's outside the system? And it split evenly, which I was sort of surprised at, since we've been talking about this is all about the outsiders and we hate politicians. But among the 46% who said they wanted to see somebody who has experience, Donald Trump got 3%. So there is definitely a sense among people now as they go and vote that when they're looking for somebody who looks and sounds and acts presidential, both in temperament, in style, and in policy, he does not come to mind.
I would argue, Jonah, that his message changed, and he lost a little bit of the focus on Make America Great Again and the optimism that I can change America. And it became a little bit in the weeds of the criticism of others and maybe the stuff is going wrong.
Yeah, and also, I mean, what dominated his message right before that last Iowa debate was the Fox News stuff, right, which helped him with people who already liked him. The question, and that's one of Donald Trump's big problems, is that a lot of the stuff that he does whips up the people who already like him, but does little to attract new people to him. And again, you have to take it with a caveat, because no modern politician has been better at Donald Trump at flipping his negatives. You know, when he came in, that's one of the reasons why people like me thought he was going to go nowhere, is because he was so unpopular with some people. He's moved those numbers, but it now seems like that 46%, they're not going to be won over by him. And that's one of the advantages, going back to this Rubio thing, that's one of the advantages that Rubio has, is that he's the least objectionable to the most people, and that is a very useful thing, because Trump is the most popular figure in the Republican Party, and he's the most unpopular figure in the Republican Party.
You know what? I think that's why this week is so fascinating. His ability or inability to turn that second place in Iowa into a big moment for him to win in New Hampshire. Rat Mouse says, ratings boom, Dr. K counseling candidates who drop out would pay to see it.
That'd be a great
That would be great.
show.
Like, we could get a couch.
Oh my gosh, it would be.
They'd lie down and say,
like a Between Two
this
Ferns?
is what
That would be
this
fantastic.
is what happened.
Yes.
This is where I went wrong.
Yes.
Tell me about your mother.
Can't take his lines.
Sorry. Be my assistant. He's going to get all my lines ahead of me. Although I would say, you know, number one, I'd come heavily armed with drugs, because I think some of them are irredeemable. In terms of psychology, you're just going to have to drug them up to the eyeballs. And there are a couple I might not take as patients. The doctor has a prerogative of refusing treatment, and I might just.
By the way, Jeb Bush is on Greta Van Susteren right now, and hopefully you have your computer and you're tuned in to Fox, because that's really the way to do it. But Amy, he has lost the glasses. He has officially lost the glasses.
I don't know that I like the not glasses look.
Really?
I feel like just from here it makes him look a little bit older and a little more
Older
tired.
than with the round glasses?
Yeah, you know, he had kind of
I think
funky
he should
glasses.
own his patrician thing and get a monocle. Awesome look.
And a pipe?
Maybe, yeah.
Maybe a pipe?
Maybe a Mr. Peanut thing? I don't know. But.
Barbara Bush is campaigning on the trail.
I don't get it.
Yeah.
It's like the endorsement of Eric Cantor. Strategically, I don't understand, particularly because of all the taunting he's gotten from Trump, echoed by others. You know, he says, I'm my own man. Yes, of course, we know that. But when you trot out your mother, it doesn't look strong. I mean,
Trump
no disrespect, of course.
Yeah, Trump obviously is hitting him hard on that. What about Jeb Bush? Where does he have to finish, Amy, to continue this?
He has to be in this mix. Now,
1, 2, 3.
yeah, well, and if we have a Kasich, Rubio, and Bush all clumped together in the teens, or, you know, somebody's at 12 and somebody's at 15 and somebody's at 10, then it's going to be very hard to say, okay, one of you has to get out. They say, well, we're all basically the same, and now we all get to move on. Now, the only advantage that Jeb has over the other candidates not named Rubio is he still has money, and he still has an infrastructure, and he still has a campaign staff that can do those things. But I would not want to be in the race as any of those candidates if I'm
I think
far
Jeb,
out.
I think Jeb can go to South Carolina because one, he's got endorsements down there. His poll numbers are better, and he's got a lot of money. But it does remind me of the when you were talking about if they're all clumped together. Remember Joe Lieberman in 2004, where he says, I'm in a tight three-way tie for third place." I don't think that really rallies the troops.
Rallies the
I
troops.
think the
But-
other factor might be how Trump does. If he wins big, the pressure will be that you've got to get one guy out there, because it could be too late if you cannibalize each other.
By the way, at this moment, the Iowa GOP just certified the caucus results. Ted Cruz, 51,666. Donald Trump, 45,429. Marco Rubio, 43,228. Jim Gilmore, 12 votes in Iowa.
Well, he's just getting traction.
And
It's
they're
just-
quality
it's the
votes.
tortoise.
They're quality.
He's the tortoise.
But
boys.
on the delegates, 8 go to Ted Cruz, 7 for Donald Trump, and 7 for Marco Rubio.
Right.
3 to Ben Carson.
Right. So that's why this is the long. When it comes to the long game, this is what I've been sort of talking about from the beginning. But this Ted Cruz is also very well positioned for the long game, between his money, between his infrastructure, his discipline, and the campaign calendar. Going from New Hampshire, where he's not expected to do well, so that's a nice little gimme for him there. Go right to South Carolina, and then whatever happens in Nevada. But mostly he's going to be looking at the March 1st states, which are heavily Southern and should benefit him, depending on how many people are in this field.
By the way, 187,000 votes.
That's
a huge
nobody
number
predicted that.
for Iowa.
Nobody predicted that.
And it didn't benefit Trump.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the amazing.
So counterintuitive.
Well, because, I think what we learned from Iowa was, to your point about he's the most polarizing candidate in the race, either love him or hate him, he brought out people, including people who came out only because they wanted to vote against him, right? So when you are that polarizing, when you go into a race, I don't know that I've seen a time when a candidate went into a race with his negatives were higher than almost anybody else on the Republican side. That is the danger for Donald, is he brings out a lot of people. They're not all for him.
All right, let's turn to the Democratic side. We have that Sanders-Hillary today from New Hampshire, I think.
We need to defend the Second Amendment, the right to keep and bear arms. We need to defend the Fourth and Fifth Amendments, our rights to privacy. How many of y'all here have your cell phones? Let me ask you, please leave your cell phones on. I want to make sure President Obama hears every word we say.
We ended up losing it by 0.2%. Although, to tell you the truth, the Iowa caucus is so complicated, it's not 100% sure that we didn't win it. But we feel fantastic.
I hope you will think hard about which person can do all parts of the job, who can be both a president and a commander-in-chief on day one, who has both the heart and the head, the experience and the results, to go to work for you every single day.
Bernie looked a little different there at the beginning. That was Ted Cruz
And supporting the second.
Oh, no, that was a before and after.
Before and after. No, that was Ted Cruz using some libertarian type lines in New Hampshire today. Then you saw Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton with a much different pitch in tone and tenor than the kind of Iowa yelling speech that we saw a couple days heading up to the.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of the problem for Hillary, is, by my track, there have been at least 5 remakes of Hillary, right? And so I think Bernie Sanders' jab about some days she's a moderate, some days she's a progressive, is actually a very good one, because it underscores one of her great vulnerabilities, which is that she just doesn't come across as very authentic. Every 3 months there's another piece in the New York Times about how they're really going to try this time to come out with the authentic Hillary. And I think the problem is that she's not a compelling candidate. And every time she changes gears or changes her pitch, it just reinforces the impression that she's very desperate to win and doesn't have a real core.
And I would echo that and even refine it a little bit more to say the problem is not that she changes it all the time, but there's never been a message, right? That the Bernie message is very clear. And when I was in Iowa and you talk to people who were showing up to go caucus, Democrats, they said, I'm for Bernie because income inequality is so important and we need to support this. The folks supporting Hillary, they're kind of all over that, oh, she's a woman, oh, she's been doing this work for a while. Everybody had sort of their own reason to do it, but there's not a unifying core message for who she is. Ultimately, I think she has come upon this, I'm the most prepared for this, because at first it was I'm the most electable, which Bernie Sanders can show the polls saying that that's not totally the case.
There was also the it's because she's a woman thing, which I don't think does not play in part because Hillary Clinton's not a category anymore. She's been in the public eye for 30 years.
She is Hillary Clinton, period.
Paul Joseph says that wasn't Cruz in the first soundbite. That was Bernie after Dr. K's prescription.
See?
Yeah, I've been known to do that to older patients. Look, if there is, I was interested in the ideological argument that you showed earlier in the show, but him saying, she isn't progressive, she's, or on alternate days. I think if there is an ideological trajectory here, I think at the beginning she decided she was going to run left. Sort of desperate, she did all the things. She was imitating him, and it wasn't working. Her numbers were sinking. So I think they began to realize that you're not going to out-left a socialist who honeymooned in the Soviet Union. I still can't get over that honeymoon. It sticks with me all the time. So you've got to stake out the territory. I'm the center-left candidate who can actually achieve things.
Right.
I'm not just the doer, but my ideology is one that it allows a bridge to the other side, a bridge to the 21st century, as I recall. And Bernie obviously is not. He said we're going to have a revolution. The revolution is going to succeed and everything will be utopian. But I think that's a more reasonable spot for her. And also, if there is any authenticity left in her, although I suspect it's been beaten out of her over the 30 years, it would be much more center-right than Bernie, perhaps left of Bill, her husband, but not that much left of him.
I want to play one more soundbite before we wrap up, and that is the talk about Hillary's emails and what's inside from the House Intel Committee on this investigation.
I have never read anything that's more sensitive than what these emails contain. They do reveal classified methods, they do reveal classified sources, and they do reveal human assets. I can't imagine how anyone could be familiar with these emails, whether they're sending them or receiving them, and not realize that these are highly classified.
Facebook had some interesting data out of the Iowa caucuses. It said one of the top searched topics on the Democratic side was the email scandal.
And you could see that in the exit polls, too, that people who said, I don't know how they phrased it, whether it was honest and trustworthy or, in that same vein, the Democrats have a problem with Hillary Clinton, too. It's not just a Republican or a general election problem. It is a Democratic problem. Bernie Sanders, up until this point, has stayed away from making that his argument. I still think he stays away from making that his argument because he really does want to be about ideology.
So he can say it's a serious legal issue, let's let it play out, what. But doesn't he plant the seed of doubt and say, but let's remember
but I don't
that
know
if this...
That's right. If this gets worse, right?
Are we going to take that risk?
Are we going to take that risk? Right. Is
he going to get there?
No. I do not think he will do that.
But this is
which is a terrible mistake.
It makes no sense.
Politically.
The idea that it's a personal attack to talk about exposing the secrets of the United States, it's not a personal attack. It's as if unless it's about abstract ideology, it's an illegitimate issue. That's nuts.
I mean, it's like Chris Christie on the Republican side.
Yeah.
They go down the Bridgegate thing.
Right.
Are there other shoes to drop on Bridgegate? Of course somebody's going to bring it up because they say, how can the nominee possibly have something hanging out there?
This reminds me of John McCain in 2008, who refused, on high principle, I admire him for it, but I think he was entirely wrong, to go after Jeremiah Wright because he said it's irrelevant, it's a guilt by association. You're running against a candidate, an Obama, a Senator Obama, who's a blank slate, so there's nothing else you can invoke in judging him, and he eschews it at the very beginning. Now, he wouldn't have won anyway, but I thought that was a mistake, and it had no logic to it.
Breaking news here It's good to have Greta's show on while you're doing the online show. Senator Santorum getting out of the race and endorsing Marco Rubio.
Boom.
We kind of talked about that in the commercial break. You know, Santorum obviously didn't have a large following this time around, didn't have a huge percentage in Iowa, but he still has respect, especially among social conservatives.
Right. Yeah.
Does this make a difference?
You know, it might. It might. His constituency is a very Trumpian constituency. It's a blue-collar, working class, not counting the sort of social conservative movement, pro-life crowd. And he also actually would be a very effective surrogate, I think, for Rubio if they deployed him strategically and wisely to the various blue-collar constituencies. He'd be pretty good in New Hampshire for Rubio.
Yeah,
Amy?
that's an excellent. That's a very good point. Making it, because I think Rubio sells himself to evangelical voters pretty well. In fact, he did pretty well in Iowa among that group of voters. And in fact, I think you're right that where Santorum goes is much more on the class issue than he does on the evangelical piece of it.
Yeah, the book Blue Collar Conservatives.
Yeah, no, I think it's not going to sway a lot of voters, but I think it may it may influence them because they would trust him as on these issues as the guy who's essentially saying it's okay. You know, he may not be one of us exactly, but he's okay, and he's better than the others. And I do think we might be looking at the next Attorney General. Thought I'd throw that in there.
Wow, we're going to record this, and we're going to make sure we have
that
this.
That comes after the Chris Christie endorsement. Don't you know that?
All right, panel, thank you very much. As always, thank you for logging on. Special Report Online every Wednesday when we can. We like to do it, to interact with you. Control room, a little goodbye.